What if the reason you're not moving forward isn't fear, but the fact that your brain has built a perfectly logical case for staying exactly where you are? Not an emotional excuse, not self-sabotage, but a well-structured argument. Because if that's true, then waiting isn't weakness, it's persuasion. And today, we're going to unpack how your own thinking quietly talks you out of change. Not through panic or doubt, but through calm, reasonable explanations that feel responsible, mature, and correct. You already know something needs to change. Not emotionally, logically. There is no chaos in your thinking, no confusion about the situation. You see the trade-offs, you understand the risks, you've likely explained your situation to others clearly, rationally, convincingly. And yet, every time you come close to acting, your mind steps in with calm, reasonable arguments. This isn't the right moment. Let's just observe a bit longer. There's no urgency yet. Nothing dramatic, nothing irrational, which is exactly why it works. If this kind of thinking sounds familiar, make sure you subscribe to the channel. This series is about decisions that look rational on the surface, but quietly cost you years underneath. Most people don't fail because they can't decide. They fail because they keep their decisions suspended. They treat decisions like drafts instead of conclusions. On the surface, this looks reasonable, careful, thoughtful, responsible. But psychologically, something else is happening. A suspended decision feels safer than a wrong one because it postpones accountability. As long as the decision is under consideration, you don't have to confront consequences. You don't have to risk being wrong, and the mind loves that loophole. This is why people often say, "I know what I should do. I'm just not ready yet." That sentence sounds like hesitation, but it's actually a form of self-protection. Because readiness is undefined. It has no deadline, no metric, no finish line. So the decision stays alive, but inactive. What makes this dangerous is that the brain interprets non-movement as neutrality. It isn't. Every day a decision remains suspended. The environment keeps changing without you. Opportunities decay, constraints tighten, alternatives quietly disappear. But because nothing dramatic happens at once, the cost stays invisible. And invisible costs are the easiest to tolerate. There's also an identity component at play. As long as you're deciding, you can still see yourself as competent, rational, and cautious. You haven't failed yet, you're just preparing. That self-image is comforting. It allows you to believe the situation is temporary, even when weeks or months pass without change. The real problem, then, isn't indecision. It's the belief that not finalizing a decision keeps you safe. It doesn't. It just delays the moment where reality gives feedback. And the longer that delay lasts, the harder it becomes to trust your own judgment at all. Here's the dangerous part. No one is stopping you. No external force. No obvious obstacle. So your mind fills the gap. It doesn't block you with fear. It doesn't overwhelm you with doubt. It steps in calmly, almost helpfully. It becomes both the judge and the defense attorney. It says, let's gather a bit more information. We owe it to ourselves to be careful. This decision affects others too. All of this sounds mature, responsible, even ethical. And that's exactly why it works. Because when resistance comes from the outside, you can push back against it. You can say, this is pressure, this is fear, this is avoidance. But when resistance comes from your own reasoning, there's nothing to fight. You trust it. What makes these arguments so powerful is that they're rarely completely wrong. Yes, more information can help. Yes, decisions do affect other people. Yes, caution has value. The problem isn't the content of the arguments, it's their timing. They appear precisely at the moment when clarity would otherwise turn into action. And instead of stopping you outright, they slow you down just enough to keep everything exactly as it is. Another subtle mechanism is emotional insulation. By framing hesitation as responsibility, your mind protects you from discomfort. You don't feel like someone who's avoiding a choice. You feel like someone who's being thoughtful. That emotional reframing matters. Because people rarely act against their self-image. If you see yourself as careful, you will continue to act carefully. even when careful, has quietly become costly. Over time, this creates a strange imbalance. Your internal narrative sounds solid and rational, but your external reality remains unchanged. You're thinking at a high level, but living at the same level. And because nothing dramatic breaks, there's no trigger to reassess the strategy. Waiting becomes normalized. This is also why advice from others often fails. When someone says, "Why don't you just decide?" It feels dismissive. Not because they're wrong, but because they don't see the complexity your mind is actively managing. Your reasoning has become a full-time job, and walking away from it feels irresponsible, and that's the real trap. The more intelligent and conscientious you are, the more convincing these internal arguments become. Not because they lead you somewhere, but because they help you stay where you are. At this stage, most people make a critical mistake. They assume, once I see through this, I'll act. But awareness alone doesn't break the loop, because the logic keeps evolving. Every new insight becomes another reason to wait. Now that I understand the risks better, now that I've seen more perspectives, your thinking becomes sharper. Your behavior stays the same. You don't feel stuck. You feel engaged, busy, reflective, responsible. That's why motivation doesn't help. You're not unmotivated, you're convinced. If you want a structured way to interrupt this pattern, this is exactly what the quit-and-go decision framework was built for. Not to tell you what to do, but to expose where your reasoning quietly turns against you. I'll link it below. If this video is putting words to something you've felt for a long time, something you haven't been able to articulate, subscribe. This channel isn't about pushing you into action. It's about helping you stop talking yourself out of decisions you already understand. The more thoughtful you are, the harder this becomes. Your intelligence doesn't free you. It builds a stronger cage. Every step forward threatens something that already works, so you stay. Not because you're afraid, but because you can justify it elegantly. That's why advice like, "just take action," feels shallow. You're not stuck because you lack courage. You're stuck because your reasoning is too coherent. Every argument for waiting has a cost, not immediately, not dramatically, but cumulatively. But comfort has a price, and comfort is the most expensive place to stay too long. This is where frameworks matter more than inspiration. The quit-and-go decision framework forces one uncomfortable shift. It treats not acting as an active decision, with consequences, not emotionally, structurally, which makes the cost harder to see. But comfort has a price, and comfort is the most expensive place to stay too long. This is where frameworks matter more than inspiration. The quit-and-go decision framework forces one uncomfortable shift. It treats not acting as an active decision and with consequences, not emotionally, structurally. That reframing alone changes how your brain evaluates the situation. If you want more content like this, calm, structured, and honest, subscribe to the channel. No hype, no urgency manipulation, just better thinking under pressure. Eventually, one thing breaks the spell. Not fear, not confidence, but a quiet realization. If my reasons were truly about safety, I'd feel more secure by now. Instead, you feel restless, subtly dissatisfied, mentally tired of revisiting the same thoughts. That's the signal, not to think harder, but to change the rules of how you decide. This is where most people either move forward or double down on thinking. When you stop debating and start structuring, something unexpected happens. The noise quiets down, not because the situation suddenly becomes easy, but because the rules of engagement change. You are no longer trying to win an argument inside your head. You are no longer searching for the perfect justification. Because the question is no longer, should I change? But instead, what am I paying to stay? That shift is subtle and decisive. It moves your attention away from imagined future risks and back onto present, measurable costs. Costs you've normalized so deeply that you stopped counting them. The energy spent explaining your situation to yourself, the mental bandwidth consumed by constant reevaluation, the slow erosion of confidence that comes from not trusting your own conclusions. Once the frame changes, those costs become visible. And visibility changes weight. Time is no longer abstract. It becomes cumulative. Comfort is no longer neutral. It becomes expensive. What also changes is how your identity behaves. As long as you're debating, you can still see yourself as someone preparing, someone thoughtful, someone responsible. But once the structure is in place, that narrative collapses. You're no longer almost ready. You're either paying to stay or choosing to move. And that clarity is uncomfortable at first, because structure removes plausible deniability. It eliminates the mental escape routes. I just need more clarity. I'm being cautious. This isn't the right time. Those sentences lose their power once they're forced through a framework. What replaces them isn't pressure, it's alignment. Your thinking stops circling. Your decision space narrows. Not because options disappear, but because avoidance no longer masquerades as intelligence. That's the pivot point this entire series leads to. Not action for action's sake, not courage theatrics, but a clean separation between reasoning that informs decisions and reasoning that protects comfort. And it's exactly why most people never experience this shift, because it requires them to stop asking better questions and start accepting clearer answers. If you want to keep following this series and learn how to make decisions without getting trapped in your own reasoning, subscribe. And if you're at a real crossroads right now, take a look at Quit and Go, the decision framework linked below. Not to rush you, not to push you, but to help you decide without quietly lying to yourself. Your brain isn't your enemy, but it is an excellent lawyer for the status quo. It doesn't scream, it doesn't panic, it persuades. And sometimes the most rational move is to stop listening to the argument and start choosing the direction.